guys, today is gonna be a bit of a more casual video. I'm going to be doing a poetry video today. It's going to be a poetry favorites video, and I'm going to read through my favorite poems, and I'm also going to be speaking about what my methodology when it comes to reading poetry is, how I read poetry as someone who is an aspiring poet, things I do to break it down, to understand it more deeply, and to hopefully be able to intake things that will help me with my poetry in the future. So I'm going to start there, and I'm specifically going to start with how I read the poems. And I'm going to start with these two books, The Best American Poetry of, and then I've got 2023 and I've got 2024. And I love both of these. I read this one for class, this one I picked up this year. I will just walk through the process of what I do when I am reading a poem for the first time. So, first of all, when I am reading a poem for the first time, I will always read it several times. The first time I read a poem, I'm not really paying attention to the words or the meaning of the words, which kind of, it sounds funny, but just like hear me out. When I read a poem for the first time, I am reading specifically just the rhythm and sounds of the words, and I'm not intaking any of the meaning. So I will read through, let's find an example that I like. So this poem, one of my favorites in this collection, is Lamb. This one is by Richie Hoffman. So it goes, I had a lamb I brought everywhere, who only had one eye. At the train stations, all of the grown-ups would say, be mindful of your things, little boy. I'm reading specifically for the rhythm and the sounds, and I tend to, if not read it out loud, at the very least read it at a whisper, so that I can feel and hear what the poem is doing, which I think is very invaluable. It's a really invaluable part of reading poetry, that you're listening to what the techniques are and what is going on. The second time I read a poem is when I am beginning to pay attention to rhymes, sounds that are similar to each other, sounds that are intentionally next to each other. I'm paying attention to whether the poem is mostly liquids, mostly fricatives, whether there's tension, whether there's flow in the feeling of it. And that is the stuff that I'm paying attention to the second time around that I read a poem. And then the third time around, when I'm reading the poem, I'm reading for the meaning. So the third time around is when I start really slowing down and looking at the words, looking at the themes, and making connections based on that. And then usually I will read it a fourth time, and that's usually when the poem as a whole starts to come together in my mind. So I know by that point the correct rhythm, what I should be reading it at. I know by that point what sounds have emphasis and what sounds do not have emphasis, what letters or words stand out on the page. And at that point I also have a sense of the theme and the meaning of the poem itself. And really the fourth time is when I read something fully and fully understand it. So that is my methodology when it comes to reading poetry. So that being said, I'm going to go through some of my favorite poems of all time. I'm going to talk about what I like about them, and then I'm going to break down where I found them, how I heard about them, just things like that. We're going to start with the collected poems of Edna St. Vincent Millay. And I'm going to start with my favorite poem of hers and one of my favorites of all time. These are all some of my favorite poems of all time. And this one is Recuerdo. We were very tired. We were very merry. We had gone back and forth all night on the ferry. It was bare and bright and smelled like a stable. But we looked into a fire. We leaned across a table. We lay on a hilltop underneath the moon, and the whistles kept blowing, and the dawn came soon. We were very tired. We were very merry. We had gone back and forth all night on the ferry. You ate an apple, and I ate a pear. From a dozen of each we had bought somewhere. And the sky went wan, and the wind came cold, and the sun rose dripping, a bucketful of gold. We were very tired. We were very merry. We had gone back and forth all night on the ferry. We hailed, "Good morrow, mother," to a shawl-covered head, and bought a morning paper, which neither of us read. And she wept, "God bless you," for the apples and pears, and we gave her all of our money but our subway fares. So that is Recuerdo by Edna St. Vincent Millay. Next up, I'm going to read from the selected works of William Carlos Williams. If you are beginning and really are at the start of your journey with poetry, this is a great person to start with. Writes very frankly, very understandably, but very well. And this one is The Widow's Lament in Springtime. Sorrow is my own yard, where the new grass flames as it has flamed often before, but not with the cold fire that closes round me this year. 35 years I lived with my husband. The plum tree is white today, with masses of flowers. Masses of flowers loaded the cherry branches and colorsome bushes, yellow, some red. But the grief in my heart is stronger than they, for though they were my joy formerly, today I noticed them and turned away forgetting. Today my son told me that in the meadows, at the edge of the heavy woods, in the distance, he saw trees of white flowers. I feel that I would like to go there and fall into those flowers and sink into the marsh near them. The Widow's Lament in Springtime by William Carlos Williams. The next book that I am going to read today is Ornament by Anna Lena Phillips Bell. She's a very, very talented poet, and the thing that I like about her poetry is that she understands sound better than anyone else, and it's so masterful, and it's so there's no way that anyone could read this and not be extremely impressed by what she does with sound and the way that she understands and she plays with sound, you know? I'll be reading the titular poem, Ornament, so I don't think that you can get any better than this one, honestly. Is mine a gaudy god? One of bobbins, pins? Are you of salt and sod? Or mine a gaudy god, who, fingers thimble-shod, baubled, bezeled, begins, be mine a gaudy god, one of bobbins, pins? Are you of salt and sod, a fish, an element? Do leaves fall where you've trod? Are you of salt and sod, and span of milkweed pod? Seed sailing filament? Are you of salt and sod, a fish, an element? Do leaves fall where you've trod? Do you call the forest yours? Make down a meadow bed? Do leaves fall where you've trod? Your hands brush goldenrod? Your lips with deer meet pears? Do leaves fall where you've trod? Is all the forest yours? Make down a meadow bed. Make me your only own. Be mine, a gaudy god. Make down a meadow bed, with moss beneath your head, soft sheets to slumber on. Make down a meadow bed, make me your own. That is Ornament by Annalena Phillips Bell. And you can tell that she's really mastered not only sound, but movement within the line, movement within the stanza, and everything fits so perfectly. Next, favorites. This is I think it's a collected works. Oh, no, it is a Everyman's Library Pocket Poets. I really like these books. They're very convenient. Again, they're pocket sized, so you can just take them with you anywhere you go, and it's a really good way, similar to a collected works but kind of tinier, to get to know a poet and what they write about and what their style is. They're usually very well edited, so you can really get a sense of what they do on, I will say, on a smaller scale, but it's still really nice. This one I got from my local bookstore when I was in high school, and I would say that this is the book that started me on my journey into loving poetry. And I love this poem in particular because it's a very comical poem if you let it be, if you listen. And this is called Kids in a Daze. Oh, and this is by Arthur Rimbaud. So, Kids in a Daze. Black against the fog and snow, against a grating all aglow, their asses spread. 5 kids, poor things, squat and shake to watch a happy baker bake hot golden bread. They watch his white arms beat the dough and feel the heat of the bright stoves. They hear the baker softly hum and hear a crackling sound come from the baking loaves. They are transfixed. They do not dare disturb the fragrant, glowing air, warm as a mother's breast. For a rich man's holiday he bakes golden rolls and pies and cakes, a sugary feast. And then, beneath the smoky roof, they hear a song from a savory loaf, just like a bird. The warm window steams and glows, and they squat in their ragged clothes, their senses blurred. They even think that they're rich too, poor baby Jesuses in a row as the snow falls. They stick their little noses in through the grating, moaning something through the holes. In a daze, saying prayers and bending towards the lights of paradise. So hard they split their pants, and their shirt tails dance in a wind like ice. So this is Kids in a Daze. Next, we're gonna move on to one of my favorite poets, Sylvia Plath. This is, for me, it is a very important read. Again, someone who was very influential at the beginning of my poetry journey. This is Poppies in July from Ariel by Sylvia Plath. Little poppies, little hell flames, do you do no harm? You flicker. I cannot touch you. I put my hands among the flames. Nothing burns. And it exhausts me to watch you, flickering like that, wrinkly and clear red, like the skin of a mouth. A mouth just bloodied. Little bloody skirts. There are fumes that I cannot touch. Where are your opiates, your nauseous capsules? If I could bleed or sleep, if my mouth could marry a hurt like that, or your liquors seep to me in this glass capsule, dulling and stilling, but colorless. Colorless. This is Poppies in July by Sylvia Plath. Next, we're gonna move on to the best American poetry, and I was going to do 2023, but I actually haven't brushed up on this one. It's probably been over a year, so I have some favorites in here, but I haven't read them recently enough. So I'm just gonna move on to the best American poetry of 2024, and we are gonna read The Deer by Alma Kadoji. So sorry if I mispronounced that. Alma Kajo. It might be Kajo. Yeah, I think I definitely mispronounced that the first time. So this is The Deer. Walking alone in a forest, I came upon a deer. This was not a vision. It faced me on its 4 thin legs, unmoved as a cave painting, brushed by light. I made myself still. I spoke to it softly. I can't remember what I said. It regarded me as a god would, transfixed by my astonishment. Then, slowly, I moved closer, and the deer did not run. By now, you know it was love I walked toward, not the deer, but what hung in the space between us. I know it was love because as I held my breath, the deer took a few steps toward me before bounding into the camouflage of branches and leaves. That is The Deer. And this is in the best American poetry of 2024. And those are all the poems that I have. Those are my favorites. They are all, not only are the poems my favorites, but it was difficult to pick my favorite. I'll say this. Within the books that I read, there are many other poems that would also be considered my favorites that I chose not to read because these are just like the absolute, like my absolute most favorite, if that makes sense. But yeah, thank you for watching this. I hope it was enjoyable. Let me know if you guys would like more poetry content. I recently read a poetry handbook by Mary Oliver. I finished that up, and I finished that up recently again as like a supplemental to my writing, and I'm almost done with, oh, I'm actually filming on it, but I'm almost done with Poets Teaching Poets. It's a book of essays edited by two poets. Well, a book of essays where these two poets selected other poets to write the essays and edited the book together, if that makes sense. It's a collection of essays. But yeah, let me know if you would like me to talk about either of those two. The next book that I've got on my docket is, what is it called? I think it's called A Poet's Ear. And that's the next book on craft that I will be reading. So yeah, let me know if you would like me to talk about any of those. And I'll see you next time. Bye!